God, I'm absolutely buzzing. Look at that for a carp. Bobbin's just cracked against the blank and just ripped off. I'm playing a pretty powerful fish. Yes, we've got him. Oh. Hey guys, so today I am at the Stannick Lakes complex in Northamptonshire, and I'm going to be fishing Roman Lake, which is the syndicate lake, which I'm very fortunate to be a member of. Now, I'm here for a 24-hour session, and I'd like to show you how I go about approaching a typical 24-hour session at this time of year. So let's get some kit out the van and take a walk. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is some Polaroids, which are already on my head ready to go. Then, seeing as it's already very warm, it's only early in the morning, the temperatures are already really high, and I do think there's going to be a floater fishing opportunity. So I'm going to grab my floater bag there, and a landing net, and a floater rod. Just a minimal kit at the moment. Now, in the past, I used to go for a walk around the lake just with a bucket of floaters and a catapult or throwing stick, and quite often I'd get the fish feeding confidently but not take the rod round with me, and quite often some of those floater fishing opportunities can present themselves really early on. By the time I'd run back to the van, grabbed a rod and a net, the fish had stopped feeding and I found them really hard to get going again. So I always go for a walk on the lake with a floater rod and net as well as the floaters. So, having said that, let's go. So I've just had a lap of the lake and the fish do seem to be fairly well spread out, but I've come to this one narrow arm of the lake where the wind is just lightly pushing down, and there's quite a lot of fish milling around just under the surface, not far from the bank at all here. So I'm going to introduce a few floaters now, and the floaters I'm using are floating trout pellets. Now, I know a lot of people like using dog biscuits, and dog biscuits caught so many carp over the years and will continue to catch carp on the top. But for me, when it can be a little bit tricky, I think the carp definitely have a preference or show a preference to the trout pellets. I mean, they are designed for feeding fish, not for feeding dogs. And I think once they get a taste for them, I think they actively search out more. And for me, they definitely do have an edge over the plain, ordinary dog biscuits that a lot of people tend to use. Now, one of the hazards we face when fishing on the surface is bird life. Either ducks, swans, geese, or in this instance, seagulls. This lake is notoriously bad for seagulls. You can start off with just one flying overhead like we've got now, put out a few floaters, within seconds there's 50 or 60 just dive bombing the swim, which does it no good at all. So here's a little tip. I have a spod rod here with bright orange braid on the reel, and I just have a bare lead. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cast this well beyond where I intend on fishing. Then tighten the line, but keep the rod high up in the air so that the braid is running right through the air. And that bright braid really does deter all sorts of bird life. So that's what I'm going to do now. Cast it well past where I'm going to be fishing. Clipped. Tighten up to the lead. Just leave the rod popped up in the tree. Now, I'm on a quiet syndicate lake today. In fact, I'm the only person here. So I can get away with fishing like this or using this technique. But if you're on a popular or busy day ticket or club lake, then obviously be mindful about where you're casting and don't upset any other anglers. Now, instead of using a catapult, I actually use a throwing stick for introducing my floaters because it has numerous advantages. The first one is it enables me to get the floaters out further than I can with a catapult. Also, I found myself before when I was using a catty, I found myself carrying out repairs at really important times. Just when the fish were starting to feed really confidently and I wanted to get more floaters in, the elastic would break or the pouch would break or something. I'd have to carry out repairs, whereas with a throwing stick, it never breaks. Also, it allows me to feed one-handed. So if I'm playing a fish and the fish is, while I'm playing that fish is starting to lose interest in the feed or they've eaten all the floaters, I can just scoop the floaters up with one hand and then feed like that. So I've been feeding the swim with floaters for about half an hour and it really was taking very confidently. So I think I've made probably 2 or 3 casts, and as you can see, we're now playing a fish. I think actual angling time so far has been about 10 minutes. When I hooked this fish, it went on a mad run into the lake. I think it took about 50 yards of line on its first run. Crazy. It doesn't feel a bad fish. The bubble float slid right up the line as well. Looks like I'm fishing with a 20-yard long upland. The net got stuck under the pads. Right, this time, come on, please, please, cooperate, please, Carp, please. Now it's stuck. This time, please, please. Get in, yes, we got him. Look at that for a carp. Which one is it?
Fish up.
Shut up.
Yeah, 40 pounder, mate.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look at that. That's that big common we kept seeing in the edge. No way. Oh my God, I'm absolutely buzzing.
Well, what an absolutely awesome looking carp that is, and what an amazing start to this session. 10 minutes fishing and we've got a 42 pound 7 ounce common. My new surface caught personal best. Oh, I'm absolutely speechless. It's crazy that there was so many fish feeding on the top out there, but we kept seeing this one big common, and this is the one that nailed the floater. I am so pleased, so pleased. What a fish.
So this is the surface setup that I use to catch that 42 pounder, and this is the setup I use for the vast majority of my float fishing except for free lining. The main line itself is 12 pound surface. It's a dedicated surface fishing main line, one that floats, and that is really important. You don't want anything sinking behind the float. That will not only ruin presentation, but it may come in contact with fish that are moving around in the upper layers, and that's just going to spook them. The float, that is a extra large bolt bubble. Now this is the only size bolt bubble I use, is the extra large. This allows me to cast well beyond where the fish are feeding. If I was to land this right in amongst the fish, it would just spook them. But the extra large allows me to cast in excess of 100 yards if I need to. So I can cast well beyond the fish and then slowly retrieve the rig, sneak it in position right in amongst the feeding fish, and they don't even know it's been placed there. Also, the extra large version really does emphasize the bolt effect, and there's little doubt as to whether the fish has taken the hook bait or not. Usually it's a big eruption, a big explosion on the surface, followed by the fizzing of the clutch. The hook link, that is 12 pound zig and floater in a trans khaki coloration, which is very camouflage indeed. And the hook, that is a size 10 zig and floater hook, and the hook bait is fished really tight to the shank of the hook there. That's done almost like KD style, so it's like a knotless knot, whipped down, half a dozen turns, and the hair's kicked out, and whipped below it, and whipped back up. That way it's almost like it's bait banded on. It's fished really tight to the shank there, and when the fish is viewing it from below, the hook itself is kind of masked by the silhouette of the hook bait. I also have a small piece of fine hook silicone there over the eye to ensure the line exits straight and it doesn't narrow the gape there, which will reduce the hooking potential of the rig. Now on to the hook bait itself. All I'm using here is a trimmed down live system pop-up, and it really does match the free offerings I'm using very well indeed. And as you can see, it's a really simple setup, but it's one that's caught me countless carp over the years, including a 42 pounder just a short while ago. Well, after catching that fish, the other carp that were here, they have gone off the boil a bit, which is hardly surprising. I mean, I was paddling and splashing around just down here in front of me. But it is only early in the day, so I'm gonna reel in here for now and go for another walk around the lake, because I'm sure there'll be an opportunity somewhere else to be had. Well, it's been a real struggle this afternoon. After the fish left that narrow arm of the lake, they became really well spread out, and there wasn't really any areas where there was big groups of fish, and that made it really hard work for fishing on the surface. Just wasn't able to build up any sort of feed-in competition that's needed really for them fish to make a mistake and take the hook bait. But I have sort of built up a better understanding of the lake as the day's gone on, areas where I've seen fish visiting more frequently than others, and that's enabled me to build up some sort of plan about where I want to go for the night ahead. So I'm going to give this float of fishing perhaps another 5-10 minutes, and if nothing's happened, then I'm going to go back to the van, get the rest of my kit and get the bivvy up for the night ahead, because it's forecast thunderstorms very soon and I don't want to get wet. So during the day, while I've been walking around trying to get fish feeding on the surface, as the fish have been moving on the surface, it's allowed me to see areas that they seem to frequent more than any other. And although the fish have been in small groups of 2s and 3s dotted around the lake, there seems to be more fish visiting the centre of the main bowl of the lake. So this is where I'm going to focus my attentions for the night ahead. All I'm doing now, I'm just casting around with a bare lead just to try and find clear areas in amongst the weed. It is fairly weedy, and like on most lakes, any far bank marker that's quite obvious, that seems to be the focus of attention for lots of anglers. They seem to have a nice tree or a marker on the far margin, something they can see during the night, and that'll be where they focus lots of the attentions and focus lots of bait. And it's these spots that the carp often keep clean of weed just due to their feeding activity. So what I've done here, there's a really obvious kind of arse-shaped tree in the background, which I quite like the look of, and I'm drilling it right down the middle as always. And the lead went down with a real crack. I'm just pulling it back now. There's a real nice tap of gravel before it hits weed. I had a cast around with just a bare lead to begin with, and then I swapped over to a grappling style lead, just to see if what I am reading out there, but I believe it's clear. But I had a few casts around with the grappling lead, and it is actually clear. This is the weed it hits on the edge of the clear spot. And that allows me then to formulate a plan for tonight. Allows me to decide if I'm going to fish with pop-ups or bottom baits, if there's any debris on the lake bed that could get caught on the hook point, that can affect the way the hook flies up in a carp's mouth. Then I'll fish pop-ups. If it's nice and clean, I'll always fish a bottom bait, always. For me, it just seems much more natural. And on a really clean lake bed, even I think short pop-ups can just be a little bit too blatant, especially on waters where you're fishing for big pressured fish. Right, so that's clean. I'm going to wrap this out now and then do the same on the fishing rods and get some rods in the water. So I found a really nice area to the left of the swim. It's a nice, clean, silty spot, and surrounding that area is really thick weed. It's not a very big spot, but the fact that it's clean and all around it's weed, I think it's being kept clean by feeding activity. So I'm going to introduce just 6 or 7 spods. Hopefully it can produce a bite. But there's been a bit of a rush to get everything set up before it gets dark. I'm just about to cast my 3rd and final rod out now. I've got 2 rods fished tight on the firm area out in front of the swim near the arse-shaped tree. And this one is going to the left on that silty spot. So let's get it in place. So my baiting plan for tonight is really simple. I'm just focusing on oily and pellets, but I have pimped it to the max. I have got a mixture of 10mm and 15mm Pacific tuna boilies. Most of the bigger boilies I have actually crumbed up. I've then added a generous amount of hot chorizo liquid. This is a really nice spicy liquid that complements the Pacific tuna very well indeed. And once I've given that a good mix, I've then added some oily bag mix. This has lots of tiny pellets, salmon fry crumb, krill meal, and it really does add a whole new dimension to the mix. Well, the rods are finally in, and just in the nick of time, I think. It's just started raining, and looking at some of the black clouds that are coming over, I think we're in for a real thunderstorm any moment. So I don't know how I feel about going into tonight, if I'm honest. There are fish in the area. I'm happy with where the rods are and how they're presented, but I don't know, maybe it's because it was such a frantic rush getting the rods in. I don't know, I feel more optimistic than I am confident, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the night brings. Well, good morning. It was a fairly quiet night last night. Nothing happened at all. It was a pretty warm and muggy night though, even after that big thunderstorm that we had. I'm not too disappointed that I didn't catch last night. If I'm honest, I was more confident of a morning bite, and I do feel like at the moment we are in bite time. There has been a few fish showing over the area. There's also been quite a lot of fish showing to the right, but they mainly seem to be up on the surface. It's so warm and muggy right now, and conditions are going to be like that through the day. It's going to be overcast, temperatures low 20s, very little wind, so I think through the day there's going to be some floater fishing opportunities without a doubt. But at the moment I'm quite content to sit out with the rods on the bottom. I do feel like there's a chance off the bottom at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to stick it out for a little bit longer and then make a decision in a little while. Well, I did say I thought there was a chance of a bite on the bottom. The right hand rod bobbin just cracked against the blank and just ripped off. I'm playing a pretty powerful fish. Going. Powerful fish. Taken about 50-yard line right out across the pond. The fish had just got itself stuck in a little bit of weed down this margin. Just had to wade out a little bit just to get a bit more leverage, and it's just sort of gradually pulled through. Come on. This time. Here he comes. There. Come on. Yes, we've got him. Oh, it's a really nice looking fish. Lovely fish. Well, sitting on my hands was definitely the right thing to do. There was quite a lot of fish showing in the upper layers this morning, but I did think there was a chance on the bottom, and this 27-pound 12-ounce mirror definitely proves that to be true. What a really nice fish it is. It gave me a proper run around as well. I think it took about 50-yard of line on its first run. So yeah, crazy fight. Really happy with that. Well, I've just slipped that fish back and got changed into some dry clothes. But so far, I haven't really spoke about the tactics that I've been using. There was a bit of a rush last night to get the rods in the water before it got dark and before the thunderstorm came. But the tactics that I opted for was a solid PVA bag approach. There is a little bit of weed out there, although when I was casting around with that grappling lead, it was coming back clean. Just a little bit of paranoia maybe crept in, and I just wanted to know that the setup was presented absolutely perfectly, and I know that if I put it inside a solid PVA bag, even if it laid over a little bit of eelgrass, it would be presented absolutely bang on. So this is the setup in closer detail. I have a 3 1/4 ounce inline lead, and that is fished drop-off style. There is weed elsewhere on the lake, which is quite dense in places, and I know that if a fish ploughs into that, I want to know that I can extract the fish safely, and ditching the lead enables me to do that. Generally, when the fish discharge the lead, they often rise up in the water. That's exactly what happened with this fish. It was high up in the water all the time I was playing it. But you see the drop-off inline lead there. When the fish tightens up to the lead, it feels the initial resistance, and as it bolts off, that plug comes out the bottom of the lead, then you're just left with the insert in the top there, which comes out during the fight. Coming down from that, I have a 4-inch length of 25-pound reflex braid. Then at the sharp end, I have a size 4 curve short hook, and I have a tungsten flipper there over the eye to improve the hooking properties of the rig. I have a small rig ring tied level with the barb to create a blowback effect, and the hook bait I'm using, that is a trimmed down white Carp Freaks pop-up. Now I've trimmed it down so that it acts basically as a wafter. It just sinks under the weight of the hook. And this has all been placed inside a solid PVA bag. I've been using the oily bag mix, which I'm also putting in with the spod mix as well. I've been putting it in with the boilies and the pellets, the bigger pellets, so it kind of almost matches the hatch to some degree. And this little white hook bait, that just wafts around just above the hook there. So when the PVA itself dissolves, you're just left with that pile of feed and a little bit of a white fleck, a little bit almost like a sight bob, if you like, in amongst all that parcel of food. And I think the fish just come along, eat the whole thing in one mouthful, and my little Carp Freak hook bait just happens to be in that mouthful. And it's worked so far. But I do think now that the chances of catching on the bottom have pretty much gone. There's so many fish on the surface now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reel in these rods and go and look for another surface opportunity. Well, my time here at Roman Lake is pretty much coming to an end now. I still have one rod fishing on the surface, but it's been such hard work this morning. The seagulls have been an absolute nightmare. Even with the braid running through the air, they've been sort of dive bombing around it, and I've had very limited opportunities. But I'm certainly not going to be going home disappointed. This was actually my first session back on the Syndicate Lake this year. So to catch a 42-pound common 10 minutes after casting out, and then backing it up with that 27-pound mirror this morning, it really was a very welcome return. But that pretty much is it for me on this session. I need to reel in, I need to hit the road, but I'll see you guys again very, very soon.